The S Pen that you've loved for years suddenly feels different. Well, Samsung almost made this a reality, but then they changed their mind at the last minute. What if I told you that Samsung was planning a complete redesign of how the S Pen works on the S27 Ultra? They were ready to throw away years of proven technology just to make the phone a few millimeters thinner. But then something unexpected happened. They decided to scrap the entire plan. Today, we're diving deep into Samsung's secret S Pen experiment that almost changed everything. We'll explore why they wanted to change it, what the new technology would have looked like, and most importantly, why they decided to stick with what works. Plus, I'll share some exciting news about bigger batteries that might finally solve Samsung's biggest weakness. Let's start with what Samsung was actually planning to do with the S27 Ultra. You know how the current S Pen works, right? It uses something called EMR technology, which stands for Electromagnetic Resonance. Basically, there's a special layer inside your phone's display called a digitizer that detects when you're using the S Pen. This digitizer is what makes the S Pen so accurate and responsive. But here's the thing, this digitizer layer adds thickness to the phone. Samsung looked at their Galaxy S26 Ultra, which is already pretty slim at 7.9 millimeters, and thought they could make it even thinner. Their plan was simple: remove the digitizer layer completely. But wait, if you remove the digitizer, how would the S Pen still work? That's where Samsung's experimental technology comes in. They wanted to create a hybrid system that combines electromagnetic resonance with something called Active Electrostatic technology. Now, the Active Electrostatic technology works differently than electromagnetic resonance. Instead of the phone detecting the pen itself would have a battery and internal circuits. The pen would basically power itself and communicate with the phone in a completely different way. Samsung's dream was to create the perfect pen that wouldn't need a digitizer in the phone or a battery in the pen itself. Sounds amazing, right? Well, not so fast. According to reports from Korea's ET News, Samsung recently reviewed this plan and decided to drop it entirely. The reason might surprise you. It turns out that people aren't really that excited about having even thinner phones. Think about it. When was the last time you looked at your phone and thought, I wish this was thinner? Most people are more concerned about battery life, camera quality, and overall performance. Samsung realized that spending all this time and money to make the phone slightly thinner wasn't worth the risk. And there are real risks involved here. The current electromagnetic resonance system has been used by Samsung for years. It's reliable, it works perfectly, and users trust it. Why fix something that isn't broken? But there's another big reason why Samsung decided to stick with the current system. Have you heard of Qi2 wireless charging? It's the new wireless charging standard that uses magnets to align your phone perfectly on the charger. Apple already uses this technology with their MagSafe system. Samsung wants to adopt Qi2 too, but here's the problem. The magnets used in Qi2 can interfere with the electromagnetic resonance system that the S Pen relies on. When magnets get too close to the digitizer, they can create dead zones on the display where the S Pen simply won't work. Imagine trying to write a note and having certain areas of your screen completely unresponsive. That would be a disaster for Samsung. So Samsung is stuck between two choices. They can either keep the reliable electromagnetic resonance system and find another way to implement Qi2, or they can experiment with new pen technology that might not work as well. For now, they're choosing reliability over innovation. And honestly, I think that's the smart choice. Let me tell you why Samsung is being so careful about this. Do you remember the Galaxy Note 7? That phone had exploding batteries because Samsung rushed new technology to market. The company learned a hard lesson about the importance of thorough testing. They don't want to repeat that mistake with the S Pen. The current EMR system is proven technology. Samsung has been using it for years across multiple devices. They know exactly how it behaves, what its limitations are, and how to optimize it. Switching to a completely new system would mean starting from scratch. They'd have to test it extensively, work out all the bugs, and make sure it's as reliable as what they have now. That's a huge risk for one of their most important product lines. But let's talk about what this means for you as a user. The good news is that the S Pen on the Galaxy S27 Ultra will work exactly like you expect it to. It'll be just as accurate, just as responsive, and just as reliable as the current version. You won't have to worry about battery life in your pen or compatibility issues with new technology. The bad news is that the phone might not be quite as thin as it could have been. But honestly, we're talking about fractions of a millimeter here. You probably wouldn't even notice the difference. Now, here's where things get really interesting. While Samsung decided not to experiment with S Pen technology, they might be planning something much more exciting for the S27 Ultra. I'm talking about significantly bigger batteries. This is actually way more important than making the phone thinner. Let's be honest. Samsung's biggest weakness has always been battery capacity. The Galaxy S26 Ultra comes with a 5,000 mAh battery. For a phone that costs $1,300, that's pretty disappointing. Chinese phones in the same price range often have 6,000 or even 7,000 mAh batteries. So why can't Samsung do the same? It all comes down to the type of batteries Samsung uses. Samsung sticks with lithium-ion batteries because they're safe and reliable. But if you want more capacity in a lithium-ion battery, you have to make it thicker. And we just established that Samsung doesn't want to make their phones thicker. Chinese manufacturers use silicon-carbon batteries instead. These batteries can pack more power into the same space as a traditional lithium-ion battery, but they're newer technology, and Samsung is hesitant to adopt them. Remember the Note 7 situation. Samsung has very strict standards for battery technology now. They want to test everything thoroughly before putting it in consumer devices. But here's the exciting part. Recent reports suggest that Samsung is finally testing silicon-carbon batteries for the Galaxy S27 series. They're apparently working on a battery that could reach 6,699 mAh capacity. That's almost 35% more battery life than the current S26 Ultra. Imagine having your phone last an entire day of heavy use without any battery anxiety. That would be a game changer. Of course, there are still challenges to work out. The test samples are currently coming out thicker than Samsung wants. They're aiming for about 12.3 millimeters of thickness, but the prototypes are reaching 12.8 millimeters. The extra thickness comes from thermal management layers between the battery cells. Samsung is working on a new stacking method to reduce this thickness. But even if they can't hit their target thickness exactly, a bigger battery would be worth a slightly thicker phone. Most users would gladly trade a millimeter of thickness for several hours of extra battery life. Now, I should mention that these battery rumors aren't confirmed yet. We heard similar rumors before the Galaxy S26 launch, and those didn't pan out. So take this information with a grain of salt. But the fact that Samsung is actively testing this technology is encouraging. It shows they're listening to user feedback about battery life. So what's the takeaway from all of this? Samsung had the opportunity to completely redesign the S Pen for the S27 Ultra. They could have made the phone thinner and potentially solved some wireless charging issues. But they chose stability over experimentation. They decided that a proven reliable S Pen experience was more valuable than a slightly thinner phone. And honestly, I think they made the right choice. The S Pen is one of the most beloved features of the Ultra series. Users depend on it for work, creativity, and daily tasks. Messing with that experience could have backfired badly. Instead, Samsung seems to be focusing their innovation efforts on areas where users actually want improvement. Bigger batteries, better cameras, and faster performance matter more than shaving off a few millimeters. What do you think about Samsung's decision? Would you have preferred a thinner phone with experimental S Pen technology, or are you happy they're sticking with what works? Let me know in the comments below. And if you're excited about the possibility of bigger batteries in future Samsung phones, make sure to hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the notification bell so you don't miss any updates about the S27 series. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Goodbye.